Hello everyone, it's Wednesday, the week's midway point, and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. All eyes are on Pyongyang to see whether the regime goes for a second attempt to launch a spy satellite. North Korea has been protesting against the notion that the satellite launch goes against UNSC resolutions and has even threatened the International Maritime Organization, saying it may not give prior notice before another launch. Amid such tensions during the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo reaffirmed their agreement on real-time data sharing on North Korean missile threats. And perhaps in opposition to those trilateral ties, on Tuesday, Chinese and Russian warplanes entered Korea's Air Defense Identification Zone, or KADIZ. How are these tensions going to develop? For an in-depth analysis, we welcome into the studio Dr. Go Myung-hyun, Senior Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Evans Revere, Senior Advisor at Albright Stonebridge Group. Mr. Revere is also a former Acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Mr. Revere, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Dr. Go. Now, North Korea previously launched satellites, Kwangmyeong-sun 3-2 and Kwangmyeong-sun 4, as far as I know, though we do not know whether they are working right now. This time's first spy satellite was named Malligyong, right? Could you give us some background on the origin and the reasons behind such names?
So Malligyong, the recently launched the spy satellite by North Korea, means in Korean word, it means a telescope that you are able to see 10,000 yards away. So essentially the idea that they are able to see far away. So which essentially I think explains the nature and the attributes of this particular satellite. So essentially this is an observation or reconnaissance satellite. And the reason why this is interesting is because North Korea tend to have this naming scheme for their satellites that they use the term Kwangmyeong-sung. Kwangmyeong-sung is a lodestar, which essentially stands for Kim Jong-il, the current leader's late father. So, for instance, the founder of North Korea is the son,
right?
And then the son of the founder is Kim Jong-il, and then his nickname will be the Kwangmyeong-sung or the Lodestar. So, and then North Korea has been using this nomenclature for all this time, but this time around they abandoned this naming scheme, and so this is, I think, significant in many ways. For instance, I think abandoning the name that actually denotes the name of the father of the current leader shows that Kim Jong-un is trying to separate himself from his father's legacy. And then added to that, there's the technical nature of the satellite. So it represents the evolution of the North Korea's space technology. So what it means basically is that the North Koreans are reserving the name Kwangmyeong-sung for symbolic events or like groundbreaking technological breakthroughs, such as the first time the North Korea launched a satellite into space, into the orbit. Sorry. So I think from now on, Kim Jong-un is going to use naming schemes that are more technical, more technical, that denotes the actual attribute, actual nature of the North Korea's advancements in space, as well as in other military aspects.
Right, interesting. Now, Mr. Revere, last week's launch took place at a new launch site located 3 kilometers away from an existing launch pad at the Seoul Satellite Launching Ground. And experts say the preparation process is very different depending on the location of the launch. How is it different?
Well, I think the most interesting takeaway that I've seen from looking at the commercial satellite imagery and reading some of the analyses that have been appearing on the internet and in various periodicals, the most interesting takeaway is that North Korea was actually making launch preparations. There was launch activities going on simultaneously, both at the new launch site as well as the main launch site. So for me, that was quite interesting. We can speculate why that was going on, but the fact is that there was missile activity that we could see in real time on the satellite imagery going on in both locations. And it was almost as if, more than just speculation now, North Korea from the beginning was anticipating more than one launch here, because the imagery after the recent launch has shown that the activity at the main launch site continues. Launch preparation activity continues there. So it's not unreasonable with that background in mind to begin to think that there is another launch coming up within the next several days or so. And I would just note an important footnote here. The warning to ships and aircraft that North Korea issued through the IMO, that warning is through the 11th of June. So it is certainly theoretically possible that the North Koreans may very well be preparing another launch, and that launch would take place at some point between now and the 11th of June.
I see. Now, Dr. Go, so Kim Jong vowed to go ahead with another launch as soon as possible. And given that Kim Jong-un is very eager to secure this ISR capabilities, it does seem like, as our Mr. Revere pointed out, that we will have to see one more coming up soon. Do you agree that North Korea was aiming for more than one launch from the beginning?
I think so, definitely, because part of the reason is because North Korea has tested a new space vehicle model. So clearly, North Korea understands that there are a lot of uncertainties regarding the success of such a launch. So I'm sure they made provisions to make sure that if the first launch fails, then they can immediately try out the second one. So this speaks volumes about the approaches that North Koreans are taking under Kim Jong-un. They are essentially more pragmatic than the predecessors. Kim Jong-un's predecessors used to be, for instance, under Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung, they tried to hide failures from the public view. But then Kim Jong-un is different in the sense that he acknowledges the failures. And that was also shown in the statement that the North Korean government issued right in the aftermath of the failure of the launch. Right. So that means also they are making provisions to learn from, apply the lessons of the failure and then apply necessary changes and make sure that the second attempt is successful. But the question is whether the second attempt will be successful too. So I think that's the reason why North Koreans are making sure that the second one is going to be successful, because after the second one, it's unlikely that North Koreans have made provisions for a third, essentially insurance launch. So right. I think we'll be interested to see whether North Koreans will be able to be successful in the second one.
Right, we'll have to wait and see. Now, Mr. Revere, regarding the second spy satellite launch attempt, now in response to the IMO's first ever adoption of a resolution condemning the satellite launch, Pyongyang said, as you have talked about it earlier, it will no longer let the IMO know of future rocket launch plans. Should we be worried about this?
Well, anytime the North Koreans launch a missile or a rocket and do not notify the international community about it, yes, we should be worried. But the important technical detail that I pointed out earlier should be kept in mind. I mean, the North Koreans obviously were not pleased about the IMO's reaction to their launch, and so they have made this threat. How serious they are about that, I don't know. But the fact is that if North Korea, between now and the 11th of June, including the 11th of June, launches a similar rocket, similar missile, on a similar flight path, then that alert that they've already given through the IMO would still hold. It would still be the guidance that airmen and ships should follow. But if we go beyond that date and North Korea fails to alert aircraft and ships in the area, then that is obviously a serious concern. Let's also keep in mind that over the decades, North Korea has on a number of occasions launched missiles and rockets into nearby waters and through that airspace without issuing the appropriate warning. So there is a precedent for this dangerous kind of behavior. But the next few days will tell us which direction the North Koreans are heading in.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, meanwhile, amid tensions on the peninsula, Chinese and Russian military aircraft entered the KADIZ for around an hour on Tuesday. Though the aircraft did not violate Korean's airspace, there was no prior notice given to authorities, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What does this mean?
So this is not a new behavior by Russia and China. It has been, they have done this before, and then I think they've been carrying out such air patrols and the intrusion into Korean airspace. Korean, different air identification zone, or KADIZ, since at least 2018. So it's been ongoing for several years, and I think it started with the growing the friction between Korea and Japan over many, historical and political issues, which I think show to the Chinese and Russians that there's an opportunity to drive a wedge between Korea and Japan, and then therefore weakening the U.S.-led defense architecture in Northeast Asia by conducting such air patrols. So they've been testing not just the cohesion of the alliance between United States, Japan, United States, Korea, and also the trilateral security cooperation, but also testing the readiness of the air forces of the respective countries. So I think, but this time around, given the background of improvement of relations between Seoul and Tokyo, as well as the strengthening of the trilateral defense coordination, I think this time around, the Russian and Chinese behavior has a different meaning. It's probably that the Russians and Chinese are trying to send a message to the three countries, Korea, Japan, and United States, that the Russia and China are not deterred by the strengthening of the defense cooperation, that they will continue to conduct this kind of threatening and provocative actions for the foreseeable future. So this is one way for Russia and China to develop a leverage over the three countries in Northeast Asia and make sure that their presence is felt very keenly in this part of the world.
I see. Now, Mr. Revere, staying with Russia and China here, another UNSC meeting recently ended without a concrete outcome yet again. Is structural reform the only way to tackle this series of inaction caused by Russia and China's veto power? And with South Korea again elected to the UNSC after an 11-year absence as a non-permanent member, will this in any way help?
Well, quite frankly, the idea of reforming the UN Security Council and carrying out the sort of structural reform that you suggested is probably a difficult, well, certainly a difficult and probably an impossible task, quite frankly. And the Russians and the Chinese know that. The idea of major changes to the UN Security Council at this point in time, particularly with the Council so divided, is just not going to happen. The Russians and the Chinese have made a very careful strategic calculation or recalculation, if you will, of their respective relations with North Korea. Both Moscow and Beijing regard North Korea as a de facto strategic partner, a strategic ally. And to the extent that a nuclear-armed North Korea and a hostile North Korea makes life difficult for the United States and for the Republic of Korea and for Japan, that, in the view of Moscow and Beijing, works to their advantage. So I think we are in a new situation now. The fact that we've had so many Security Council meetings that have failed to produce any sort of progress on this is the new normal right now. This is what we're going to have to live with going forward. But the final point that you made about the Republic of Korea coming onto the Security Council for a 2-year term, that's an important one. The Republic of Korea's voice needs to be heard, a voice of responsibility, a voice of concern, a voice that reflects the views of more than 50 million ROK citizens. That voice needs to be heard. South Korea's voice needs to be listened to, and I think it's important. It'll be an important reminder to Moscow and Beijing that there is yet one more country in the international community that is determined to stand up for what's right and ask them to do the right thing when it comes to dealing with North Korea in the future.
I see. Now, Dr. Goh, moving on to the pull-aside meetings that were held on the margins of the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. Seoul and Washington's defense ministers, they agreed to conduct a joint investigation once the salvage operation of the sunken rocket is complete. Now, what data could be collected from the wreckage? Oh,
it's going to be an intelligence bonanza for the alliance. The last time this happened was back in 2012, when North Korea had a similar failure with their space vehicle. And this is a very golden opportunity to collect very sensitive intelligence. And then this is only possible because North Koreans launched a rocket because this is a characteristic of the space vehicle launch. Unlike the ballistic missiles that can be launched in any direction, and usually they fall in the deep waters of the East Sea, the space vehicles that are launched from North Korea, they have to head it towards the equator, meaning that whenever they fail, they fall into the shallow waters of the Yellow Sea, which enable us, South Korea and the United States, to salvage the remnants of all debris of the space vehicles and analyze them. And then it's been like 10 years since the alliance has been able to analyze the components and materials that are used to make the North Korea space vehicles. And this time around, what's more important is that North Korea claims that they used a new model of a space vehicle. And so that means that it represents the cutting edge of North Korea's space technology, which is highly correlated with the degree of advancements that North Korea has been able to reach in developing their intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the combination of factors, the shallow waters, the relative, the fact that the state of the debris is pretty intact, I think it represents a major intelligence victory on the part of Korea and the United States, a major failure for North Korea. So I think for the North Korean regime, this represents a double failure. So not just the fact that they failed to successfully launch a new space vehicle, but added to that, what's added to the injury is the fact that North Korea is allowing Seoul and Washington to have access to the most sensitive technology that North Korea possesses right now.
Right, interesting. It'll be a chance for us to know what kind of technology North Korea has right now.
Exactly.
Right. One more question, Dr. Go. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo agreed to operate a system to share this real-time information on North Korean missile warning, right? And that is going to happen within this year. What details are being discussed?
So it's going to be mostly about monitoring the trajectory of North Korea's missile launches. So what the three countries are going to share will be the location of the launch and the relative angle of launch and where it falls. So this is actually represents the precursor to the information that or the intelligence that three countries can use to intercept the North Korea's missiles. So I think in that sense, this is a very sensitive development. Not just for the three countries that are forming this partnership, but also for North Korea and China. I think this is expected because given the advancements that North Korea has reached and the increase in threat on the part of North Korea with their ballistic missile program, it was about time for the three countries to come together and then develop this kind of coordination. But then I think this has implication beyond the Korean Peninsula because this is exactly the scenario that China was concerned about, that the three countries will be working together and monitor not just the North Korea's ballistic missiles, but also the Chinese ones.
Right.
So essentially, the three countries are starting the foundation of an early detection system. And this is going to be the foundation of any viable missile defense system. So this has very strong downstream implications.
I see. Significant move indeed. Now, Mr. Revere, what caught my eye is that the real-time sharing of data will, for now, focus on North Korean missile threats. Now, could this be a way to show that South Korea is not going to be part of Washington's missile defense system for now, given that China could be very sensitive about this matter?
I don't think that's the central message that Korea is broadcasting by agreeing to participate in this. The greatest near-term threat to the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United States right now is North Korea, especially a North Korea that has declared as a matter of national policy its right to conduct first nuclear strikes. So the biggest priority for Seoul, for Tokyo, and for Washington right now is the sort of cooperation that we've been discussing for the last couple of minutes, real-time exchanges of information to deal with the most immediate threat. Downstream, however, this cooperation has the possibility and the potential to expand beyond North Korea. I suspect it will. But for now, I think South Korea is rightfully focused, as the United States and Japan both are, on the most immediate threat of concern to each of them, a nuclear threat, a missile threat from a country that has threatened to conduct first nuclear strikes.
Right, I see your point. Now, Dr. Go, South Korean and Japanese defense minister too held a meeting, and they decided to stop making an issue of this radar lock-on dispute that dates back to 2018. What was the stark difference that made both of the parties to make this an issue for more than around 3 to 4 years? And do you believe this issue being dealt with in this way is constructive way?
Well, after all, that was in a way the radar incident, or like the surveillance plane incident, the maritime patrol plane incident was pretty much played up in the background of the growing tension between Seoul and Tokyo. So the incident itself was quite a minor one. I mean, you can attribute to it serious significance if you want to, but you can also play it down if you want to. So essentially, it was really was depending on the eye of the beholder. So essentially, if you want to play it up for political reasons, you could. And in this time around, the two parties have agreed that this wasn't a serious incident that underpinned the relationship between Seoul and Tokyo for the future. So the two sides essentially agreed to turn the page and close a chapter on this sordid affair that wasn't really a major issue anyways. So I think this shows that when the South Korea and Japan can have similar goals, they can overcome any kind of differences. So in that sense, I think we should take this as a lesson that the relationship between Seoul and Tokyo can be politicized, but then when we politicize it, there are downstream repercussions, negative repercussions for both countries.
Right. Now, Mr. Vivier, I believe this could be our last question. South Korean Defense Minister reportedly held a 50-minute meeting with his new Chinese counterpart and emphasized the role of China in achieving peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. What role could China play, and is it willing to play?
Those are two very important and very different questions. I think it was the right thing to do to have the meeting. I think it was important to keep the channels of dialogue open between Seoul and Beijing on defense and security matters. Obviously, Korea has a big stake on the Korean Peninsula and how China manages these issues. I think it's important to continue to remind Beijing, remind the PRC that it needs to play a responsible role in dealing with the burgeoning threat that we're seeing from North Korea. As I suggested in my remarks earlier, Beijing has not been doing a very effective job either in the UN Security Council or in other fora in being helpful to the ROK, to the United States and the international community. So it was good for South Korea's defense minister to remind China of what South Korea's expectations are. Having said that, is China going to, as a result of this meeting, change its approach of treating North Korea as the strategic and tactical ally that it is? I don't think so. I think we are in a different game here when it comes to the Korean Peninsula vis-a-vis China's role in being a de facto partner, supporter, and ally of North Korea. That's the new reality we face, and that's what we're going to have to deal with for the coming years.
All right, I see your point. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Dr. Go and Mr. Revere, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure. You're welcome.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.